The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. On this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from The Englishman's Handbook by Idries Shah. 7. Masterly inactivity. Is seeing the worst in everything a national characteristic? Giles Brandreth, former MP for the City of Chester. The above question might give the impression that the Englishman is not sure of himself. My experience of the creature, fortified by British people I have been canvassing, is that the whole question of sure and unsure, or of feeling insecure, a largely recent American importation, is irrelevant to most of the English. A growing number of British people are convinced that self-questioning is not even American. It has become naturalized there through the Austrian subculture of Dr. Freud. Although it may take root in certain sections of the British population, like the chattering classes or the inhabitants of Hampstead, on the whole, this havering is not something that comes easily. In Britain, as in most of the pre-Freud or Vienna innocent world, it is most likely to be regarded as a morbid condition. As such, it would naturally be left to experts for solution and would certainly form no part of polite conversation. Therefore, questions like the one at the top of this chapter are much more likely to be put strictly for rhetorical reasons, as yet another weapon in the vast and sophisticated armory of techniques for dealing with foreigners. I don't know, of course, how far the specialized skill of dealing with foreigners goes back in history. It was certainly in perfect operation as early as 1066. In that year, the people of Kent assessed the situation and went out to welcome William the Conqueror with green boughs. Not for them the unnecessary and widely trumpeted heroism of the resistance attempted by the English King Harold. In consequence, the county of Kent acquired, and still proudly uses, the motto Invicta, unconquered. Technically, of course, this is true. The people of Kent were not beaten in battle, since there wasn't one. If that is not pure genius, I would like to know what is. This flexibility allows the British to move the goalposts before the hapless foreigner's very eyes. For instance, when challenged by pressure groups about a refusal to admit refugees, a British high official delivered a most amazing explanation. He insisted they were not exactly refused, they could always get tourist visas and outstay them. Of course, dealing with foreigners, like handling people inside the country, should have a good dash of delay about it. There is nothing like delay, stretching things out until everyone has lost interest, to ensure the British point of view prevails. This technique, which they invented, they call masterly inactivity. I vividly recall my daughter Saira, born and brought up in England, returning to culture shock in Britain. She had been with the Mujahideen warriors inside Afghanistan under Soviet rule and in the Afghan refugee camps. The thing about there, she said, despairing at some seemingly intractable delay, is that there you can't get much done without a tip or bribe, but it gets done. Here they won't take bribes, but they won't do it either. The British long ago discovered that foreigners are highly impatient creatures. It is a theme which runs through English literature and humour. Full use is made of this knowledge. I have seen this technique encapsulated in the great English saying, "If in doubt, sweat it out," so often in action that I can without hesitation rephrase a British motto, "He who delays wins." The experts are given the tricky matters to deal with, royal commissions, committees of inquiry, courts of law, and the rest. They are, however, only distillations from the mass of the people. Everybody in Britain knows how to do it. You only have to have a blocked gutter, a washing machine not working, a device not operating, to hear the refrain echoing through your head even before you have called the maintenance man. "You won't get that fixed in a hurry, mate. Dear me, just look at the condition of that. What you been doing to it, eh? You won't get away with under £100 plus tax. We're talking about nearer 200 here. Of course, I can't come next week, it's a bank holiday, then there's Easter. Of course, the summer will hold us back a bit, then with the holidays and Christmas coming after that, let's say a couple of years, eh, Squire?" This is not only a matter of every British person's experience. The potential for such behaviour lies within him or her too, deeply in, you might almost say built in. If you want to get something done in England, the following, more complete calendar is worth consulting to ascertain when it might actually be finished or attempted. January. Too cold, staff not all back from Christmas and New Year holidays, illness, computer down, we called by but you are not in. February. Cold and or fog, illness, rail tracks frozen, winter holidays, computer down, sudden rush of work. March. Better wait until after Easter, illness, staff on leave, spare parts not available. April. Uncertainties due to tax year beginning and ending, computer down, illness, staff shortages. May. 2 bank holidays cause confusion, computer down, we called but parts not arrived yet. June. Staff shortages or illness, man broken his leg, transport up the spout, new management, computer down, suggest you wait until it all gets sorted out. July. Holiday season, temporary skeleton staff only. August, as July. September, as August and staff not all back yet, computer down, etc. October. Many bad cases of flu, weather conditions, spare parts, computer down. November. Winter holidays coming, staff shortages, soon be Christmas. December. Christmas, broken leg skiing, shortages, transport and computer problems, try in the new year. Come to think of it, there may be a brief period, about 10 days or so before Christmas, when it is possible to get a workman, cash in hand of course, for your house. This coincides exactly with the amount of work he needs to buy expensive computer games for his children's Christmas presents. Every English person will know all this already. What I am supplying is the recommendation that the delaying techniques, so hard won at home, be used on foreigners. Many foreigners, on the other hand, will not believe a word of it. So let me give an instance for the purposes of documentation. In 1990, according to the Times, it was calculated that it would take 400 years for the Council of the London Borough of Southwark to recover its rent debts. People simply weren't paying. At that rate, the debt would encompass 12 generations, the equivalent of the period from the 16th century to the present day. Fools rush in is an English proverb, of course, and yet the English characteristically laugh at the Arab saying, "Haste is from the devil." This reflection puts another complexion on a separate matter quite close to my heart. There is the question of, there is no such thing. Other foreigners may have noticed that if you go into an English shop and ask for something, if it is well known and out of stock, you will be told that there is no call for it. There is a deeper ploy than that, though. If the thing is not so well known, you are likely to hear, "No, there's no such thing." This is really clever stuff because it serves two distinct and powerful purposes, enabling the English person to capture all the high ground worth having. First, if the shop assistant is able to state that something does not exist at all, this means almost absolute power. Power to abolish, to permit, or deny the very being of something. Second, it enables said assistant to show that you are a complete idiot. Who else, after all, would enter a shop and ask for something which did not exist? There is one way to counter this. That is, to carry a sample, an empty bottle, say, or even a photograph of the item. This, it is true, will gain a grudging admission that the thing exists, but of course it will not preempt the assertion that there is no call for it. The concurrent shaking of the head, pursed lips and narrowed eyes combine to establish beyond doubt that you are probably insane or worse, if there is anything worse. Although I would not say that it is exactly fun to be in the middle of this inspired delay mechanism, it does mean that your research material is rich and everywhere. After writing the first page of this chapter, I had to go to an electrical appliance shop for a bulb to fit my desk lamp. I entered the shop to find the manager standing at the counter talking on the telephone. He was told to hold, so he asked me what I wanted. I showed him the blown bulb to establish that such things existed. Once, while attempting to change money from Taiwan, I was told by a very large bank near Piccadilly Circus that the place no longer existed. The electrician called a grimy youth from the back of the shop. Together they looked at the lamp as if it were something just landed from outer space. Together they exchanged glances and whistled through their teeth. "What do you think, Fred?" "I'll get a new one, renew the whole fitting. Old-fashioned, you see. Don't make 'em anymore." I said, "But this is new. I bought it here less than a week ago, and you told me it was the very latest thing." "Well," said the manager, "if we can replace it, it'll take 2 weeks at least. Then there's Easter," I said. "Right." "Very well," I said. 2 weeks. I knew that that would mean a month. As I left the shop, I heard the manager hollering into the telephone, "A week to fit a lousy exhaust to my car. It's a blinking liberty, that's what it is." The pace of life in Britain was stressed to me by a shoe shop proprietor I met in North Africa. He told me that he had placed an order with a British firm which they took 6 months to deliver. That was a long time, I observed, expecting to hear about how Patagonian shoes could be had within 6 hours or something of the sort. I am rather used to being told such tales of woe when travelling, and incautious enough to say that I lived in the United Kingdom. But no, this time it was even more strange. "The matter, O my brother," said the Berber, "is curious and bears repetition. Perhaps you can even shed some light upon it." "Pray recite the entire narrative," I responded, "and for your confidence I thank you." "Thank not me, it is my duty," he replied, and this is his tale. "I ordered the shoes in January. They arrived in July. When I examined one of them, I found in it the photograph of a young girl and a note in English. She gave an address in Northampton, England, and wrote that she was a packer in a shoe factory and unmarried. She would like to meet a man with his own business, perhaps a shoe shop, with a view to matrimony. She was, she said, 20 years of age." "How romantic," I said as my interlocutor paused with his beady eyes fixed on me. "What did you do? Wrote to her, I suppose?" "Better than that," replied my friend. "I decided to surprise her, for her beauty had enraptured my heart. I bought valuable presents and hied me forth to Northampton. I went by aircraft and then by bus." "And you met her?" "Patience, my friend. Haste is from the devil." I composed myself as best I could. By now we had installed ourselves at a table in the cafe next door to the shoe shop, so I covered my diabolical impatience by swallowing a gulp of mint tea. "I journeyed, as I have told you, to that big town in the north of England mentioned in the damsel's note. I found the street, then the house known by its number, as many are in those parts. Then I rang the doorbell. A fat, middle-aged woman opened the door. I told her that I had come to see the maiden whose name I had memorized, and whose photograph I thrust towards her. I added that as the mother or other senior member of her household, she could be assured that my attentions were honourable, and that I would only see the maiden chaperoned." He heaved a great sigh. But did you get to see her? Again, I could not restrain myself. He sighed again. Alas, she invited me in and told me to sit down. She was laughing so that she could hardly speak. She said something very rapidly to a great hairy savage of a man who came into the room. Then he, too, laughed. Now she spoke, slowly because she realized I didn't understand their local dialect too well. She said, "Bless you, love. That note and that picture were me, but that were all done 25 years ago. I've been married these 20 years, and I have 3 grown-up children. Those shoes didn't sell too quickly, did they? Where did you say you came from?" She had never heard of North Africa, and I'd never heard of brown ale, which they tried to make me drink. Verily, England is a land of magic and mystery. A sad, if romantic tale indeed. Eager to collect information for this book, I asked Sidi Ali what else had happened to him in England. Very little, he said, because I returned here as fast as I could, and also because my English was rather weak. So weak, indeed, that I think a bus conductor in London imagined that I wanted to collect 50-pence pieces. How so? Well, I had only a £50 note, and I said to this man when he came to sell me a ticket for 50-pence, in my best English, of course, "I am sorry, I have no 50-pence coin." He immediately replied, "Don't worry about that, you'll soon have 99 of them," and he gave me the entire change in those coins. What should I have said? Nothing, I answered, in my experience, would have been much use in the circumstances. Well, at least, said the Berber, people are kind to you in England. They just seem a little late in commercial deliveries and in not always understanding your needs. I believe that our commerce here in the souk moves faster. Obviously, it is not necessary to have a special technique when applying the slowness factor internationally. Just behave to foreigners as you do to each other. Of course, nothing in England is quite what it appears on the surface. I have often observed that everything here is for a reason. One only has to seek diligently enough to find it. So, how does the English reputation for fair play and just plain niceness fit in with masterly inactivity or even laziness? Geoffrey Wheatcroft speaks of English niceness as a myth. The English upper classes, he says, notoriously disarm their victims with charm before entrapping or defrauding them. They are sometimes termed attractively lazy, he says, but the paralytic sloth of the English goes hand in hand with an envenomed resentment of anyone who chooses to do some work. The myth of English niceness, he says, is central to the great English confidence trick. How is that performed? Well, having first persuaded ourselves, we then persuaded the rest of the world that we had invented and copyrighted decency, honesty, and fair play. Niceness, according to Mr. Wheatcroft, is the lower-class version of the upper-class charm. Since we could not really call Mr. Wheatcroft's article nice, and therefore lower class, perhaps he is to be seen as a member of the upper classes. On the other hand, reading him again, I cannot discern much upper-class charm either. Possibly then he is middle class. In any case, he can observe his fellow countrymen in a way that no foreigner would perhaps dare, though he does not seem to be able to explain them. Indeed, his last sentence asks, in a very English manner, how do we do it? The British educational system has traditionally been designed to instill a sound sense of masterly inactivity into students. In times past, the English tried to make foreign-born natives into little Brits by sending them to study at Harrow, Sandhurst, and so on, hoping to use them in due course as surrogate rulers. Note what David Martin says of this in his General Amin. With the death of Kabaka Daudi Chwa in 1939, his son Mutesa II became Kabaka at the age of 15. During the 40s, he spent about 4 years in Britain, first at Cambridge University and later in the Grenadier Guards, where King George VI gave him a commission as a captain. It was a period which moulded his life, making him the most inept Kabaka in memory. Things have indeed changed. That a British education might actually make someone unfit to rule his own people was unthinkable to generations of colonial administrators and the like. Of course, what seems to be delay or procrastination to the foreigner may only be the result of a faulty or insufficiently English education on his part. A friend did not get his grazed hand attended to at the casualty department of a London hospital because he couldn't answer a simple question. He knew English pretty well too, but when he was unable to reply or even understand the casualty officer's increasingly irate inquiry, he turned tail and fled. He arrived at my door shortly afterwards. "In my country," he said, "they would have looked at the wound and dressed it. This man had to have the answer and wouldn't do a thing until I satisfied him on this very difficult query. Really technical it was, and I'm no doctor." What were the exact words? I thought he would surely have remembered or written them down. After all, he did know a lot of English. We were using it at the time. "It was too difficult. Amazing words, I tell you." I cleaned and dressed his graze myself with the help of a first aid box, and hastened to the scene of his discomfiture, a major teaching hospital in London. It took a bit of doing, as you can imagine, but eventually I managed to see the physician who had tried to treat my friend. I explained that I was helping him with his English and wanted to know the exact form of words that had been used in connection with the grazed hand. He was quite cooperative. People in London are, in general, kindly about foreigners and their difficulties. "Yes, I remember the case well. Couldn't have been more than a couple of hours ago. Discharged himself before treatment." What was his difficulty? "Very poor English. He'd slipped and fallen over, had an abrasion on one palm. I merely asked him, 'Have you determined the presence or otherwise of particulate matter?' And he asked me to say it again. Repeated it 3 or 4 times, actually." "Of course you meant, 'Do you know if there is anything in the cut?'" "Exactly." This particular British attitude, a combination of confidence and carelessness, may help explain how they were able to dominate so much of the world during their empire. Today the empire is gone, but the attitude remains. I was at the departures area at Heathrow Airport not so long ago, among a huge crowd waiting for a flight to West Africa. There were only 2 white men among the intending passengers. The pilot of the aircraft, followed by members of his crew, appeared and started to weave through the throng when one of the Englishmen stopped him. "I say, Captain," he giggled, "this one will kill you. I'm seeing my friend off, and I've been telling him that if he's captured by cannibals in your country, he's not to get into too much of a stew." They say the devil has the best tunes. As to the best jokes between the British and foreigners, of course, we foreigners cannot always be certain that we have grasped the point of English jokes. My late father recited an anecdote related to him by an African head of state, when the former was Indian cultural envoy to West Asia. The story went that there was a certain British lord who was with a visiting commercial mission. He was only there to give some tone to the group because his title looked good on the letter paper of a large English company. Otherwise, he was rather unimpressed by trade, as his people called it. During a reception in the third world country, someone approached the peer and offered him a visiting card. "My business card," he said. "Ah, yes," said the noble lord. "I have seen one of these before. In fact, my grandmother once had one. Borrowed it, of course, but then she was a gypsy, they say." This narrative always had people in stitches of laughter. After telling it for some years, just to make sure that I had understood it, I asked a retired British ambassador what he thought of it. "Excellent," he said. Then he elucidated. "You see, the peer was being polite without selling out his own principles. Also, by referring to his rather ordinary ancestry, he was able to relate to the man he was talking to. He must have been briefed that the man with the card was a nomad or something. Our chaps on the spot are rather good at that sort of thing, you know." And, of course, it is okay in England to have a grandmother who was a gypsy or actress, but not a father or mother who was one. Things, though, are changing fast. A leader in the Evening Standard picked up the trend offered by the noble lord. The Princess Royal urges an end to discrimination against gypsies. She says this is caused by ignorance about their lifestyles. Gypsies like to travel, dislike conventional jobs, are expert horse copers and hold mystical beliefs, just like another group whom she may have been subconsciously defending, the royal family. And many people indeed openly boast of ancestors hanged for sheep stealing. Not too recent an ancestor, though. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation and is copyright 2019. All rights reserved.